This morning, we are going to be talking about technical session number 20 regarding SOHO routers. We were talking about earlier, what is SOHO? Yeah, it could be a place in California, it could be a place in New York, but in this particular case, it means small office or home office. So SOHO. Our objectives for this particular technical session, got a nice laundry list of them for us, is to compare and contrast internet connection types and features, compare and contrast Wi-Fi networking standards and encryption types. We will need to know all that. Explain the role of a router and describe the difference between a wired and wireless router. Describe how to install, configure, and deploy a SOHO router. Identify common pitfalls when installing SOHO routers and identify common problems that come up with SOHO routers. And lastly, describe how to solve some common problems that come up with your SOHO routers. BSMs we want to keep into mind while we are taking care of this technical session be communication. Obviously, IT is a team sport. We need to be able to effectively communicate with our teams, with customers, and those in the upper tiers if we are escalating tickets, so that we can effectively and efficiently take care of the customer and their needs. Persistence. We always want to be persistent in this because to a degree, we are detectives. We're trying to seek out and find what the problems are. We don't want to give up at the first roadblock we come to with a problem. We want to keep pursuing it until the end. And even if we are unable to fix it and we hand it off to someone else, I highly recommend being persistent and following up to find out what the solution actually was, so you have that extra tool in your toolkit. All right, what is the internet? Seemingly simple and complex question all at the same time. It is essentially a global system of networks that have been linked together, and it links essentially billions of computers for communicating, sharing information, and resources. All right. Consists of millions of private, public, academic, business, government networks linked together with a broad array of electronic, wireless, and optical network technologies. Many mediums all coming together, working together to form the interwebs essentially across the world. It is a huge TCP/IP based network, essentially with a mesh topology. Traffic passing through it, and utilizes a series of a complex system of routers in order to kind of keep everything up and running. No one thing controls the entire internet. It is essentially a interlocking network of nodes. So if one piece goes down, other pieces can pick up the slack and move through it. All right. TK, can you read this one for us real quick?
Yeah. Internet connections can be established through any of the following: wired, dial-up, ISDN, integrated services, digital network, DSL, digital subscriber line, cable, TV, fiber optic, wireless, satellite, cellular G level, 4G, LTE, WiMAX, Wi-Fi, tethering, mobile hotspots. That's right.
Yep, that is correct. Thank you. So yeah, these are the various options we have currently at this point. I guess you could kind of add Starlink to this, though that would probably fall under the satellite issue, though I am very curious as to how they're going to overcome the latency problems. But we're going to go through each of these, talk about some of their benefits and problems, and then pros and cons, so to speak. And a lot of it comes down to geographic location. First one on the docket is POTS, or plain old telephone service, or dial-up. Anybody here use dial-up? Probably not, because I can see all your faces. Anybody remember using dial-up? Computer would scream at you for a little bit before it finally connected. And if you were lucky, you got a blazing 57 kilobytes per second. Only took you about half an hour to load up your email. It is one of the least expensive methods we have out currently for internet. It does have about the slowest connection. Uses, you can use it when you travel, if as an absolute last resort if you need to, if your broadband goes down, or again, as it's inexpensive, you can use it as a way to save money. So, you know, many cards, although it is less and less common to see it today, will provide 2 jacks on the back, one with the RJ45, one with the RJ11. Although if absolutely necessary, you can dock a RJ11 into an RJ45 jack. It is a twisted pair cabling to reduce crosstalk, uses between 2 to 4 pins. You don't need to worry about the last modem standard, which was V92. And it is not necessarily the same thing as DSL. DSL is a different technology over the same medium. Questions so far? So key things to remember: RJ11, cheapest, slowest, and it uses twisted pair, 2 to 4 pin. Next, get up to some wire connections here. We have ISDN, or Integrated Services Digital Network. Let's see, Mark, you want to read us this one for a minute, please, sir?
Integrated Services Digital Network. It is a digital telephony technology, wow, that suggests multiple 64 kilobyte per second channels known as B on a single connection. It has the capability to carry voice, video, or data. The physical connection is through the RJ45 cable and a modem called a terminal adapter, or TA. ISDN circuits are classified as basic rate interface, BRI, or primary rate interface, PRI.
Excellent. Most of our knowledge around the different types of internet services are going to be definitional. We need to understand what they are, what kind of medium they use, and then some of the benefits and minuses. We don't need to have a thorough in-depth knowledge of it going through a plus that will be built upon for Network Plus. All right, got a couple of them here. DSL. Now, this one is kind of a group of technologies, which is really nice, and it allowed for high-speed internet to be transmitted over telephone lines. They do have several variations of it that also have, strict distance limitations. You have asynchronous and synchronous. And synchronous would mean that your upstream traffic is exactly as your downstream traffic. So you would have like 10 gigabits up and 10 gigabits down. Something along those lines, so that the traffic going both directions would be the same. This is not very common. Typically, people have asynchronous DSL, if they do have it, where they have faster downloads, for watching things like Netflix and stuff like that. So they'll have like 16 or 15 gigabits per second down, and then they'll have 4 to 5 gigabits up. They're not uploading a whole lot of stuff, but they are downloading a whole lot. So they're changing the amount of data that can travel based off of speed requirements. So DSL has async or synchronous. It operates over existing telephone lines and can be used while people are talking on the phone. That's kind of the interesting thing about it. They actually shortened the bandwidth of frequency for what our voices could be carried over the phone. Like if you're an audiophile, you might actually think, oh, my voice sounds a little weird over the phone, or somebody's voice sounds different over the phone. That's because they're shortening the wavelength that is available for voice over the phone, and they're sending data over a higher wavelength that you can't actually hear. So they're able to send both over the same lines. So interesting technology, or interesting use of an existing technology. Next, cable internet, probably one of the most common ones we have out there today, using existing cable lines. It's always connected. I wouldn't say always up, but it is always connected. You know, it can transmit TV signals as well as PC data, and it utilizes coaxial cable. And then you have an actual cable modem that will convert the PC digital signals into an analog signal to go over the copper lines. Now we get to fiber optic. Only you know, the big money people like Marvin can afford fiber optic.
Cut it out.
It is. Yes, Ramsey.
I wanted to know if is Fios a fiber optic type of technology? Like, is that what they're trying to do? With Fios, use fiber optic cables to connect people.
Okay, I'm sorry, I missed the question. One more time.
Oh, I said, is Fios when they're connecting Fios, is that fiber optic cables that they're actually providing the people to connect them to the internet?
You're talking about like when, you know, like AT&T fiber and stuff like that?
But, yeah.
What they'll do is they'll do fiber optics like a junction box. And then from there, they'll convert it to like cable or twisted pair or something like that, and then pump it into your house. So there actually is a drop off in speed when you hit to that point. A lot of times they'll run fiber optic to, say, a subdivision. And then that whole subdivision will get fiber because they can all share the data stream of the fiber optics for that whole subdivision. It is very rare that they would run fiber optic quite literally up to the house. That's big money if they're doing that. Typically it's to a junction box, and then it gets converted into, they use a bridge and they will convert it into some other means, be a twisted pair or coax. Yes, Umberto.
Yeah, why is necessary to make the conversion from analog to digital in cable modem?
Well, one, so that our computers can use it. You know, that's the analog to the digital. And then going from digital back to analog, remember, it's not running off of a twisted pair where there's, you know, multiple lines running through. It's running through a single core line. So it transmits via analog because it is a simpler medium for transmission. And it's just doing it almost like Morse code, where it's like it's on and off switches repeatedly over that analog line. And analog can actually travel further than digital at this, you know, juncture without needing repeaters. Yes, Spark.
I think what they're doing with the fiber optic cable now is if you have telephone junction boxes in your yard, we have them like right out by the street. They're running a fiber cable from there into your house, but I'm not sure how it's being fed from the junction box to that point right there.
Well, going
I
like,
didn't see. I don't understand.
yeah, and that would be a split off point, because one of those boxes in your subdivision or something like that would service 15 houses or something like that, or 20 houses. So they would bring it to that one point, and that's where they would split it up like cable. They run cable. They'll run like that really thick cable right to the junction boxes and yards, and then they'll feed it out from there because they can service multiple houses. They may get to the point where they run fiber right into the houses as our internet speed needs keep growing. You know, that's they're going to be the natural evolution of it. But the nice thing is the more people adopt it, the less expensive it becomes, because you'll have more companies dealing in it, more companies working on repairing it. So overall cost competition will drive that cost down. Hopefully. Any other questions?
What do you think the step up from fiber optics is going to be, Kelly? What's going to be Marvin's next big purchase?
Neural net. Neuralink. You just jack it straight in. You don't have to bypass the keyboard. None of that. You just upload to the matrix, sit down on a couch. You don't even need a TV anymore. You just have like a couch with like 5 docks in the back of it, and everybody just kind of plugs in when they get home. That's kind of terrifying. But
you've already seen it. If you watch what is it, Blackwater or whatever?
Black Mirror.
Black Mirror.
Yeah, they already did it with the memories and all that stuff. Like
I still got to see that. I have not seen Black Mirror.
Okay, it's gonna be something with
It'll freak you out, Kelly.
Yeah, it will.
That's probably why I shouldn't watch it.
Yeah. You might be the kind of person that won't enjoy it.
Because you already, like
you'll be
you're
like,
already in
so.
cybersecurity and it makes you paranoid. Yeah.
I knew this was gonna happen. I knew it. I've been talking about this for years. That's how you'll come off of it.
Take my tinfoil hat out and run around with it. Everybody listen to me then. All right. So fiber optic, there's no line sharing. You could multi-mode it for short distances, but for longer distances, you're going to need your single mode. And can be used for television, internet, and voice all at once. So it is an extremely high speed communication method right now. And we'll keep building upon that. All right. Satellite. Has anybody had satellite internet before? No? Nobody have satellite internet?
I think I did.
You think you did?
Like my dad had it when I was younger.
Okay. So satellites, back in the day when it was first coming out, some of the fastest downloads available. You could absolutely have some awesome download speeds with satellite. Problem was they also had the slowest upload speeds available. So if you ever wanted to send an email or anything, it was really slow. Also, for anything like this, where we would have Zoom channels or something like that, it had real heavy latency. One of our TAs that Marvin and I started out with, he had satellite internet, and there was about like a 2 to 3 second delay. So we would tell a joke, everybody would laugh, and as we were just starting to move on and continue with class, then it would hit him, and then you would see him laughing.
And it was so funny. It was so funny. Like, and got it. And his face just lights up. He was like, dang, it took about 15 seconds for him to
get
it.
It was 2 seconds to get to him, then another 2 seconds to get back to us. So, he had a little bit of a delay when he was using the satellite. So, it was unfortunately noticeable. So we get download speeds around 125 megabits per second. That's pretty fast. I mean, especially when you're talking like pre-cable internet and stuff like that, when all you had was like DSL and dial-up and stuff like this. Those blazing fast download speeds. Just upload speeds were terrible. And unfortunately, those have not really improved. Starlink supposedly has fixed this problem and fixed the latency issues. They haven't done a full rollout yet, so I haven't been able to see any live testing of it to see how capable it is. If you're a gamer at all, satellite will not work for you at all. Now, That's the biggest the biggest issue with it is the latency, and then also sensitivity to any weather conditions. If you have a majorly overcast day, you are not going to get a clear signal, and you also need to have clear line of sight of the sky to be able to have good downloads. We had cable internet in our house or in our apartment. This was quite a while ago when I was in college, and one of my roommates desperately needed cable, so we're like, all right, well, if you want to pay for it, you can get it. So they got it. They got the cable, and they wanted 3 TVs, so they had to have 3 nodes on the satellite. And we figured out real quick whose nodes were whose. And like at one point, my roommate hadn't come out of their room for like 2 or 3 days, and so to do a wellness check, I just went out and put a solo cup over their node on the satellite dish, which cut out their internet. And then lo and behold, they came out of their room. So all you need to do is just block the signal, and anything can do it. It could be tree branches, it could be clouds, any of that stuff. So all that plays into effect when you're talking about satellite. But if you're in remote areas, like way out in rural, like farm country, or just way out, this is a viable option because it doesn't require, you know, running wires all the way to the house, all that kind of fun stuff. So it does create options for other people. So the main thing with this is understanding your market, where you're at, what's available, and trying to pick the best option for you and your customers. All right. Continuing on with wireless communication. Cellular service. Big dogs in the industry. We have Verizon, AT&T, and Xfinity, although at this point, Xfinity and AT&T have merged. Or no, AT&T, excuse me. Sorry. I was thinking Singular and AT&T. Apologies. Everybody's like, man, did I miss something? No, sorry. AT&T, Xfinity, Verizon are your big players in the cellular market. It has evolved a lot over the last few years. You know, when you see the 3G, 4G, all that stuff, that just means generation. That's all the G means. It has nothing to do with the actual speeds, although each generation is able to, is capable of more speeds. A really fast 4G versus a really slow 5G, your 4G is probably going to be faster, especially now since they don't have the infrastructure really in place yet. Only in very specific metro areas I believe 5G is actually capable of it. So, all right, LTE, short for long-term evolution, can achieve, in theory, which is a big parentheses around that, in theory, 300 megabits per second, downloading 75 megabits, or yeah, downloading and then 75 megabits up. I have personally never had a phone that was capable of doing this, but in theory, I guess standing right next to the cell phone tower with nobody else making calls within a 5-mile radius of you, you can achieve these. 5G, which is kind of starting to gain a foothold and be a little more accepted by the market, supposed to have capability at some point of 10 gigabits per second with super low latency. When this does come into effect, that is going to be awesome. The only problem we will have at that point would be data limitations.
What do you mean by data limitations? Like,
you can only use 10 gigs per month.
oh, the plan that you have. Okay.
Yes. See, I got lucky. I'm on an unlimited plan because when you, like way back in the day, when you bought an iPhone, they required you get on unlimited data. It was a requirement to get the phone. And so they charge you $10 a month for unlimited data. And we've just refused to ever change our plan from then. So we now get about unlimited data for about like $10 a month, essentially, on top of our normal plan. But they do throttle us when we hit certain points. So that's going to be the big thing. And I've noticed like even cable providers like Xfinity and AT&T are doing that in your house. They didn't used to limit your data. Now they're actually limiting the data in your house. If you exceed a terabyte in a month, they charge you extra. Terabyte seems like a lot of data, unless you have an HD TV and you're downloading HD shows. If you watch an HD show, say like 1-2 hour group of episodes a day, you'll run out of a terabyte in probably about 15 to 20 days. That's with HD. You want to talk about 4K? It's probably half that. So if you're getting actual 4K signals, you'll probably run out between 10 and 12 days if you watch about 2 hours a day. So when you put it in perspectives like that, it's not a lot. All right, questions so far with regards to cell phone generations. Wireless network communications. We have the WAN, the MAN, the LAN, and the PAN. So WAN, I believe that would be satellite. MAN gets you into the WiMAX. Don't see WiMAX very often. That is more, I guess, scientific or research, I believe. It's very rare that you do see WiMAX. Wi-Fi, we are very, very familiar with Wi-Fi. We use it every day. Likely, many of you are probably on it right now. And that is 802.11 IEEE, which we're going to be breaking that down into even more categories that we need to be aware of. So our wireless standards, then we have the PAN, which is our Bluetooth 802.15. And that's good up to about 10 meters, generally. Although the newest version of Bluetooth can exceed that for certain ranges and even do power transmission through wirelessly. Now, you're probably asking yourself, what is this like IEEE 802.20, IEEE 802.16? This is literally just the written standards for each of these things, like the Wi-Fi and the Bluetooth and stuff like that. They actually have written standards. It's like a 3-ring binder full of all the things that are incorporated in having this kind of stuff, and then the different versions are isolated to different things. So everything that you deal with regards to technology is going to have a standard, and IEEE keeps track of those standards. All right, tethering. The feature may be branded as kind of like a mobile hotspot. They're kind of the same thing, like pretty close. Allows you to share internet connection of a phone or a tablet with other devices such as laptops. Many cars now actually have built-in hotspots. You can actually buy cellular service for your car and do internet, when you're inside your car, and you just turn it on or off so that other people in the vehicle can use their laptops or tablets or what have you. They actually have individual devices, just like little blocks that would be old hotspots that you could turn on. More often than not, though, people have it on their phones. Most phones are capable of it, although that feature may not be turned on. You would actually have to contact your provider to turn it on. Like in my case, I cannot turn my phone into a hotspot. They will not allow me to have the unlimited internet and have my phone as a hotspot. So they said if I want that, I have to change my contract. So it depends on your provider and your contract whether or not you're capable of doing it on your phone, though most phones are capable of it. All right, questions? All right, what is IEEE? Jordan, can you read for us, please?
It's the objective. Hold on, you want me to read the title and stuff too?
Sure.
That's fine. Okay. The Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers.
A little bit of a tongue
Its
twister. I get
objectives. Its objectives are the educational and technical advancement of electrical and electronic engineering, telecommunications, computer engineering, and allied disciplines.
All right. So yeah, basically any standard you can think of, cellular, wireless, Bluetooth, satellite, infrared, RFID, all of this stuff has standards within the IEEE 802 or IEEE system. Networking, almost everything falls under the IEEE 802 category. They have over 100 of them. No, we do not need to know all of those. Networking, I think they need you to memorize like 20 or 30 of them. But we need to be aware of what they are, what the standards mean, you know, what the IEEE is. All right. LAN. Probably the most popular networking standard we have. Logically, it is a bus. So you have the multiple points along and nodes along the way. Physically, it can be a star, a ring, or a hybrid. Can be wired or wireless. And it can use copper wire or Wi-Fi. You could also probably throw in fiber there too, because you're starting to see that crop up in some offices as well, especially communicating between floors, or if they use things like storage as a network. Different types that we have. We have our 10 base T at 10 megabits per second. We have 10 base 2, which is thin net, 10 base 5, which is thick net. Does anybody know what those two are associated with, thin net and thick net? Do we remember?
Thin client and thick client?
No, thin net and thick net.
Oh, I don't know that one then.
Got to go back to my personal favorite chapter for this one.
Coaxial.
Good.
It's on the physical layer.
It is on the physical layer. Alan, you got it. Coaxial, thin net and thick net.
It reminded me of the two different types of coaxial cores, the you know, the thick ones or the thin ones.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. That's what it is. Thin net and thick net. That's on your coax. So you were right on point. 100 base T, fast Ethernet, and you have 1000 base T, which is gigabit Ethernet, which would typically be your twisted pairs. We have 100 base FL, 1000 base X, and then a wireless Ethernet with the standards we're going to be going over, A, B, G, N, and AC. Yes, Humberto. You are muted, sir.
How an Ethernet is logically a bus?
Because logically, like the way it's looking at it is it's like one node, next node, next node, next node, next node. So it's seeing it in a line, although physically you may have it go to one node and then spread out to others, and they're kind of sharing that communication. Do you have another question or nope? Okay. All right. Wired connections are always going to be your stronger and faster connections currently. Can wireless exceed it? Here's hoping. That'd be kind of nice. So you have your copper or fiber optic. With it underneath copper, you have your single mode and your multi-mode fiber. Which one of these is immune to EMI?
Fiber optic.
Why?
Because it's light.
Very good.
Because it's what?
It's light. Fiber optic is light, so it's not going to be affected by a magnet. Well, even unless you have a really, really powerful magnet, you might be able to pull off something like that. But I think it would be only slightly and probably not worth the effort. Yes, Rienzi.
Yeah, I'm still kind of a similar question to what Mr. Pozo said about the wired versus non-wired. How is Ethernet? I thought Ethernet was considered wired, but you under that last slide at the bottom it says that it could be wired or wireless.
Yes, because of us incorporating Wi-Fi into our networks. So we're incorporating, like when you go into schools and offices and stuff like that, they may have Wi-Fi as well. And so they're able to incorporate that within the Ethernet network, the LANs. So they will have both incorporated in a singular network. Do you have something to add, Avery?
No, not right now.
Not right now. All right. On the wireless side for mobility, it offers, able to, a lot more options to be able to move stuff around without, changing a lot of things. You have Wi-Fi, which is the most common, Bluetooth for our PANs and peripherals. And then you have infrared, although that is very rare that you would see infrared being used due to needing line of sight, short distance of transmission, and very, very slow transmission speeds. Also, it's sensitive to how much sunlight is in the air. If you're in a really, really bright sunny day, it's hard to transmit via infrared. All right. Wireless characteristics, Wi-Fi characteristics. Let's see here. Chris, can you read first, please?
Wireless Ethernet networks use radio waves to communicate. You want me to do the whole
Yes,
slide?
please. Yes, please.
Okay. The wireless networks used today are based on the IEEE 802.11 Ethernet standard, marketed as Wi-Fi. Wireless networking is the area of networking with fastest ascent over the last years. Understanding Wi-Fi characteristics and installation/configuration is essential for every network technician/administrator.
Very good. Thank you. Now, we got to start getting into frequencies and channels with regards to Wi-Fi. For the most part, Wi-Fi operates off of two frequency ranges. You have the 2.4 gigahertz and the 5 gigahertz standards. Inside each band, you have specific frequencies or channels that which you can operate. Now, the problem we have is if there's overlapping in these channels, it can cause interference, crosstalk, all kinds of stuff. If anybody remember like problems with like the old baby monitors where you'd pick up radio stations, you pick up people's telephone calls on wireless phones and all that stuff because they were operating off of the same bandwidth or the same channel in those bands. So in order to avoid these things, we try to stick to non-overlapping channels. Within the 2.4 gigahertz band, there are 3 channels you will stick to in order to not have any overlap or interference. So the 3 main channels that people stick to are 1, 6, and 11. If you operate on one of those 3, you will not have overlap with any other channel. Yes, Umberto.
Yes. Which access to internet is faster, the Wi-Fi or the cellular?
Depends. A lot of that depends on the technology you're using. I mean, cellular, if you're in a true 5G area, the 5G would probably be pretty quick. Wi-Fi, it's going to heavily depend on the routers you're using and how much traffic is going on in the area as well. So it's one of those, it depends. So, all right. Does that answer your question, Humberto? Kinda. All right. So in 2.4 gigahertz, we stick to one of those three channels. I think Diego actually had a neighbor that set up their Wi-Fi on channel 4 because he had a Wi-Fi analyzer. So they set up their channel on Wi-Fi or on channel 4 for some reason because you can manually input it. So they set it up on 4 and it killed 2 channels for him. So he wasn't able to use 1 or 6 because the neighbor had used 4. So it overlapped into 2 different channels. So if this was set up by the Comcast or something like that, this would be considered an improper setup because you want to stick to the 1, 6, and 11. If you stick to those, it doesn't matter how many nodes you have, you can figure out a way using one of those 3 channels to not have that overlap or crosstalk. And this becomes important in office buildings, apartment buildings, stuff like that, where you're going to have a lot of Wi-Fi antennas operating in the same place. And remember how we were talking about the wireless mesh network, where you'd have multiple wireless access points to kind of make it seem seamless, so that you could kind of wander through and your phone kind of connects to whichever one has the strongest signal. Even in situations like that, you cannot have them all in the same channel. They all need to be on different channels so that they do not interfere with each other. All right. Tajma, I might need more information on that to see if that could be fixed. All right, so next. So 1, 6, and 11, those are your 3 non-overlapping channels. Definitely remember that. Wireless LAN standards. One of the most important points of this particular technical session. Now, 802.11a supports speeds about as high as 54 megabits per second, pretty quick. And it uses the 5 gigahertz band. And then we move on to the next standard that is in place, which was B, which supports speeds up to 11 megabits per second and uses 2.4 gigahertz. Can anybody give me an idea as to why when you go up to the next standard, speed dropped? Why would that be the case? Yes, you do need to know these for the exam. Yes, Luis.
Is it because of the gigahertz that you have on your computer?
No. Not quite, because you can get pretty high speeds on 2.4. Alan, so you had your hand up.
I was gonna say the same thing, but my second guess would be certain devices wouldn't need as much, wouldn't need that much speed to go as fast. I don't know. Like, I don't know.
Okay. Good guess. Good guess. I like it. Both good guesses. Now, what this actually has to do with, okay, go ahead, Luis.
This is my other guess. The capability, like the amount of it has like a certain limit, I think.
Good guess. Wireless standards are put in place by when they're received. So like when they're submitted, that's when they put them. B, 802.11b actually made it to market first. They did less testing. They got out to the market first, and it became one of the most widely adopted. A came out later because they did more testing. They stayed back and were slower to get to market. So A was faster. It was done by a different organization, but B got to market first. That's why even going up, the speed is going down. A was a better technology. B just got out the door faster. So you don't need to know that for the exam, but that just kind of explains why the speed drops going from a low, an A to a B, technology wise. Then we get to 802.11g. Gets up to 54 megs a second, so yay for them. They got up to the speed of A. 802.11g operates in the 2.4 gigahertz band, same as B does. And it offers up backwards compatibility to the B standard. So 802.11g is backwards compatible with B. Here's the caveat. If you have a bunch of devices running on 802.11g and you introduce an 802.11b device, everything slows down to the speed of 802.11b. Because everything needs to be talking on the same level. So yes, it's backwards compatible, but it slows down to the slowest device. Yes, Mark.
802.11a is not backwards compatible, is it?
No. G is backwards compatible with B. A was the first standard.
Right. Okay. Gotcha. Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah, I kind of figured that. I just bought a new router. And I checked the standards there to make sure I was buying the right thing. They tried to sell some trash, so I didn't buy it.
Wise choice. So, yes, we need to know each of these different standards, how fast they can go, anything special about them. Are they backwards compatible? Stuff like that. So we do need to know our wireless standards. Continuing along. We got 802.11n. This one operates on both 2.4 and 5 simultaneously, as well as being backwards compatible. It achieves superior throughput through the use of MIMO, which is multiple input, multiple output. Has a lot of antennas on it. If you look at a 802.11n router, it looks kind of like a spider laying on its back. It's got a bunch of antennas sticking up from it. So it can receive a bunch of signals and send a bunch of signals at the same time. And depending on the angle of those antennas is how it's sending those signals out. So if you have them straight up and down, they're sending them out horizontally. If you angle them, they're going to be sending them up and down at an angle. If you have them flat, they're going to be sending signals up and down. So the angle of the antennas actually can help determine the speeds you're able to get or the coverage you're able to get. It uses channel binding, so it can use multiple channels at a given time. Typically in the 5 gigahertz bandwidth is where you see this, where they'll grab a chunk of channels and use all of them at the same time versus using just a single channel. And it has speed ranges from 130 up to 150 megabits per second. So pretty quick. Although when you get 20, 30 people operating on it, it drops down pretty fast. All right. 802.11ac. This operates off of the 5 gigahertz band. It does not operate off of both like N does. It can bond up to 8 channels at one time, which allows for much faster throughput. It still has the multi-user MIMO and allows speeds as high as 1 gigabit per second. questions so far on this? Unfortunately, with Wi-Fi characteristics, a lot of it comes down to rote memorization. Wi-Fi channels was one of the things that are the Wi-Fi standards was one of the things that I wrote down on the board every single day until I got it. That was my method for remembering it.
I think I got a PNG that's gonna pop up for y'all soon.
All right. Let's see here. Alan, can you read for us, please? So this whole time you haven't had your glasses on, so you haven't been able to
I
see what
just
we're
took them
doing?
off. As soon as you called my name, I put them back
Really?
on. I just took them off. I apologize. Wi-Fi characteristics, wireless network modes. HD AOC mode, also called peer-to-peer mode, with each wireless node in direct contact with every other node. AD HOC mode, networks are suited for small groups of computers to transfer files or share printers, usually Bluetooth. Infrastructure mode, networks that use one or more WAPs to connect wireless nodes to a wired network segment. Infrastructure mode is better suited to networks that need to share dedicated resources such as internet connections.
Thank you, sir. All right. What's a WAP? In IT.
Wireless access point.
Alan had to come off mute just to giggle.
Wireless access point. All right. So yes, in infrastructure mode, that is where you're essentially going to have multiple WAPs throughout the entire building. You're going to have a main control device that you're going to use to communicate with all those other WAPs. Ad hoc mode, that is basically you're not using a router, it's direct connections between you and other computers or phones or what have you. Marvin has a pretty great example of this with regards to cruise ships, if he is available to talk about it, because he's the one who brought that one to my attention. I didn't know about that.
Which one?
With ad hoc mode, the way they do it on the cruise ships.
I say a lot of stuff. I don't remember that one.
You don't remember that one? Oh, okay.
Well, I mean, I'm pretty sure I'm there with you, but I don't. One more cup of coffee.
One more cup of coffee. Oh, it's gonna be an exciting day.
Right,
all right.
Right. I mean, bring it back up. Mention it, Kelly, because now I want to know.
No, okay. Ad hoc mode. Now, when you go into a cruise ship and you go out into the ocean, you're obviously not near a cell tower anymore, right?
Correct.
But miraculously, your texting and all that stuff still works if you utilize the app through the cruise ship.
Exactly.
What the cruise ship is doing is now using ad hoc mode with all of the devices that are on the ship communicating through each other. So you'll be on one end, but you're never more than 10, maybe 15 feet from a person. So you send the device, it jumps to their phone, then it jumps to the next phone, then it jumps to the next phone, and keeps shooting through the entire cruise ship until it actually hits the recipient of that message, and then it pops up on their phone. So it's using all your devices throughout the entire cruise ship as a mesh network to communicate and work with each other.
Kelly, if I said that, I'm a bad man because I don't remember saying it, but I can see me being a bad man. So I will take ownership of that one. I sure will. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, Rienzi.
But is it communicating outside of that boat or just within the cruise ship?
Well, it's typically like you may be communicating with something in the boat that has like a satellite connection.
Right. Right.
So if you're connecting to the main server, that would allow you to have internet access while you're on there. So that would be via satellite, because obviously they're not towing a line behind them. That would be kind of funny, but no, they don't do that. So yeah. So but it kind of it allows every device, like all of your cell phones and everything, to kind of help them with their network.
That's why they have their own little, like there's certain levels that you can purchase. You can purchase the really exclusive one where you can stream, or you can purchase the one that just allows text messaging, and you can text your partner or your group of people that you're with, and that doesn't require going too far. That can be utilized using that ad hoc. But if you want to pay the $30-some a day that they offer to do the other portions, yeah, it's expensive. Like it
Yeah.
was to the point where me and my wife shared one device that had the streaming option. Like I'm not gonna we're both not gonna pay for this because that makes no sense. So, but we all had the ability to communicate via text because that was the first tier and it was cheap. So I could totally see how how ad hoc came into play with this. So
And I have another question about, you know how when you get on the plane, or maybe I haven't been flying in a long time, but they tell you to turn off all of your devices at takeoff or, maybe landing too?
yeah.
So does that have anything to do with this kind of situation where your connection?
No, because you wouldn't necessarily be downloading a app from the airlines to communicate via internet. Although some of the, like with older devices and stuff like that, there may have been, like if you're operating off the 2.4 gigahertz bandwidth, it may have interfered with some of the instruments they have that operate over that same bandwidth. That is not necessarily the case today. I always, joked and said it was because they wanted you, like if you had to make a call, you had to use the call that was embedded in the in the seat in front of you that had the nice credit card swiper on it, and I guess they do that with the internet now too. So
you have some super smart people out there, Kelly. So this is my take on it. My take on it is the everyday person probably can keep their phone on. And I guarantee you somebody in here or somebody they know kept their phone on, didn't turn it off. Like, because how would they?
It happens a lot.
Yeah, they're not gonna know. But I think the overall thing is there may come a time where the technology is there for somebody to use some app or some device to interfere. Like most of us not even thinking that way. But if I can get you to close all of your laptops and get you to put your phones down, I'm not worried about that per se. But if everybody had laptops up and you're using it the whole ride, I won't be able to identify which one of you are possibly that person. And they have that guy on the plane or lady. I want to be gender nice. Do they have lady air marshals? I don't know. But they have that person in there that's going to help. See,
it's U.S. Marshals, man. It's not air marshals. It's U.S. 21st Marshals.
Century. I know, Kelly. I'm sorry. I took us back too far. But no, go for it, Renzi.
So it's not going to take down the plane or stop the
plane.
No.
Ever since dealing with Kelly, I'm not sure. He says no because he wants you to continue to fly and not be scared. Now I don't know. We don't know. We really don't. We will hope not. But who knows? Who really knows?
Okay. I mean, there's something.
So you keep your head on swivel. Like you just look around like, hey, ma'am, you still got that laptop up. You heard them say, turn it off.
Oh,
you
no,
be that person.
I listen when they tell me that.
Exactly. And you make sure everybody around you listen too. Because
my goodness. All right. So wait till we get to security. Then life gets fun. So ad hoc and infrastructure mode. There we go. Next, we're going to get a little bit into wireless security. We have WEP, WEP, or Wired Equivalent Privacy. It's configured with a static 40 or 104-bit WEP key. Wireless clients needing to associate with a WEP are configured with an identical key. Could be compromised no more than 2 or 3 minutes due to the nature of the static keys. This is considered a fully insufficient security method. As it states, 2 to 3 minutes, you can get through it no problem. Anybody who somewhat knows what they're doing can break the encryption on WEP technology. So just a thought when you're looking at your security you have on your Wi-Fi. This is better than nothing, but somebody who knows what they're doing can get through it. All right. After that, we needed to increase it a little bit. So we moved up to WPA. This is now a dynamic encryption key generation. It now uses a new key generated for each packet that is sent through the network. So instead of having just a single key that it continually uses, there's a new key used with each packet. And it needs the user to be authenticated before keys can be exchanged. This, we would start getting into what's called public and private keys on your system. And then when you send packets, if you're using heavy encryption, they utilize two keys. Use one key to lock it and one key to open it. And the same key you use to lock it cannot be used to open it. So, and that allows for two-way communication. All right, it uses the temporal key integrity protocol for enhanced encryption, meaning, over time that key is going to change. It doesn't remain the same. And keys are issued on an integrity check, and they have to make sure that they have not been messed with, changed, or altered during the transit of the packet itself. So, but it only partially implemented the standards of 802.11i. This was something to quickly replace WEP when they realized WEP wasn't secure at all. So they threw this into place really quickly before they built up to the next standard, which is WPA2, which uses the Advanced Encryption Standard, or AES. Remember, WEP or WPA1 uses TKIP. WEP uses basically a static key. So Advanced Encryption Standard uses a 128-bit block cipher, which is far tougher to crack than the standard WPA with TKIP. There's a centralized server that is used for authentication. And you configure your passwords using what's called a pre-shared key, which is something each of you would have ahead of time. Instead of a centralized server is referred to as personal mode. So if you could either use a server or use a pre-shared key if you so choose. As of 5 years ago, it was the strongest encryption type we had and needed to be fully implemented. The only problem is not every device is WPA2 capable. So if you're going to be using it on your network, it may block certain devices from being used just because they are not able to use that standard. So you may have to downgrade your security to WPA1, or hopefully not as low as WEP.
Anybody can tell us what can happen if you have to do that? Like what happened? Like if you have that old printer that you love that still's kicking, but it's also wireless and it was the first one. So like Kelly just said, in order for it to communicate with all these other devices with this new router that you just bought, everybody got to talk the same language. So everybody gets dumbed down to that first security protocol, which is WEP, and what's happening there. What could possibly happen there?
Bottlenecking data.
Well, you allow yourself to be susceptible to exploits because you're not utilizing the full spectrum of security that router possess and that your network desire and deserves. Like, so you pretty much, you allow yourself to be a little open. You got a chink in your armor. So lo and behold, you got to get rid of that printer. I mean, I know you want it, or make it wired. Don't use the wireless aspect of it. Try to wire it if that's is an option. You can use it to, if it's next to a desktop working through that. Just utilize the highest technology of security possible because of Kelly telling me to do so. I don't want you out there without. Go ahead, go for it, Alan.
So wouldn't it like move, everything will move slower, correct?
I mean, that's another thing. You may have a speed issue because once again, you are still utilizing that different technology. So that may be, but I'm not as concerned with speed as I am concerned with security.
Okay.
Because I know that's your open security wise because it's not utilizing WPA2. You're using a static key, a key that's set, that if I wanted to go get in the car with Avery, we take the Civic and we drive in front of your house, we'll eventually be able to get on and do things and let you be a Amazon person. We'll get that card if we wanted it, using Linux and some tools that we can talk about later. Avery told me about those, so watch out for Avery, guys.
That's a very good description of war driving, actually. Thank you, Marvin.
Sure is. No problem, sir.
That's our
Yeah.
side business. Me and Marvin roll up to people's houses.
Look for
testing
open
their-
Wi-Fi networks.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I saw a package. Let's see if they got good security. So they keep the package. Next one's coming somewhere.
Next one's ours.
That's funny. All right, here's kind of a review of it. Kind of everything kind of bundled into one here a little bit. Ad hoc mode. I'm going to go ahead and state here. This is something in your computers. You want to make sure this, or phones, this is turned off unless you're using it at that moment. This is a major security exploit if ad hoc mode is turned on your systems. Because somebody can come up, literally sit next to you at Starbucks, and then they can access everything through your system. They can do this at offices. You know, if a guest comes in, like a sales rep or something like that for an outside vendor, they can sit down next to your computer, ad hoc in, and they're automatically past all of the security because the security is being authenticated through your system and they're piggybacking off of it. So ad hoc is a major security threat. Only have it turned on for the moments you are using it, and then you turn it off immediately after. So just a PSA.
I put this image into the chat in case anybody wants it.
Thank you, Avery. The role of a router. Primary role is to allow communication between the networks through controlling the flow of data. It reads IP addresses. That's pretty much it. And it makes forwarding decisions based on those IP addresses. It does not read data. It does not read what's in the, what's in those packets, any of that stuff. It doesn't care. It just reads IPs and forwards IPs to where they should be going, based off of whatever set of rules you have in place. You can have routers on your internal network, which could break up subnets, and it could make forwarding decisions based on that from, say if you have in your accounting department, you want to send it up to the 5th floor in your R&D department, and they have their own router, you have your own router, it would be able to communicate between those two subnets and direct them there. And then you may have a router on your external facing network as well. Yes, Luis, I'll go back for 1 second.
Thank you.
Not a problem. All right. Allows home users to kind of share their cable and DSL internet if they want. But remember, like we said, your home router, which may or may not look like this, generally they're pretty much like a box now. Those devices are actually multiple devices in one. Whereas in an enterprise setting, you would have a large device like this that its sole purpose is to route traffic. That's all it does. But in your house, it's a wireless access point, it's a switch, it's a router, it's a hub. It's kind of everything in one. And they have wired and wireless models available. All right, now WAP, here we go. Wireless access point. If you've ever been to public buildings and stuff like that, you may see little devices that look like this, pushed up into the drop ceiling about every 50 feet or so. And this is used so that everybody can share free Wi-Fi or, log in with their credentials or what have you. This is an enterprise version of a wireless access point. Like I said, in our houses, typically we would use something that looks like this. And but in enterprise, you would actually incorporate something like this. If you have a extremely large house like Marvin, then you may need to install a couple of these in your home in order to carry coverage throughout.
He's got one of those in his car too.
Got one in his car. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know how I became that person because I'm not that person. You're modest. We have a modest dwelling.
I'm about to ask you, can I borrow some money?
Well, I mean, I do have a rich uncle overseas, but it's going to require. Never mind. We'll talk about it when we get to security.
All right. Now, so remember me mentioning just a couple days ago, EOP or Ethernet over power, where I could run data over the existing power lines in my house and have it be almost like a wired connection, right? It's almost like magic. Such a wonderful thing. Well, they have the other side of that coin, which is PoE, which is running power over Ethernet. Why would we want to do such a thing? Well, when we're installing things like this up in the ceiling, we don't necessarily want to run power to every single one of these nodes, because that can be, one, expensive because you have to hire electricians to do that. Two, it's added labor, added materials, added work. So they actually found a way to use your Ethernet cables or your network cables and actually run power through those Ethernet cables to power devices up in the ceiling. Like you would have these wireless access points, switches, hubs, repeaters, stuff like that, so that you can, have these devices function. You have to have something which is called a Poe injector, which is what gives power to the lines to be able to push it through these lines, and makes it significantly easier when installing devices. Although you do have to take into account that you will be dealing with low voltage 110 when you're working with your network cables. So you do have to take those extra precautions. All right. SOHO, small office or home office router. Multifunction, like I said, wears many hats. Router, bridge, gateway, DHCP server, wireless access point, firewall, all in one, and a NAT server. So everything in one nice little handy device. All right. When you're configuring your routers, a lot of this stuff is usually done for us by our ISPs when they do the installs. Sometimes we don't necessarily like the routers they gave us because they may not be the most up-to-date technology. We probably have something better and we want to use that. So when we get that set up, we got to do basic configuration. We need to set the channels. We need to set the NAT translation to make sure our IPs are matching up properly to what we want. It says it has universal plug and play. So we hope that works most of the time. Additional services that might be in the routers that you're working with. You have the firewall, which can block unwanted traffic with the use of what? What do firewalls use to block traffic?
Oh, you talking about the ports?
No, firewalls. What do firewalls use to block traffic? It's a basic set of rules, but we call it something. Like we type in all these rules into the firewall.
I'm a football player and I tear my
ACL.
There you go.
This guy gonna say meniscus.
ACL or access control lists. ACL is what is used by firewalls in order to block unwanted traffic. It can be a physical device or can be software, but there typically is firewalls even on the commercial routers you get from AT&T, Costco, not Comcast. I don't know why I keep confusing those two. Comcast,
I know why. I know we in
Because
tonight.
I need to go to Costco. I
Yep.
guess, I don't know. Comcast or AT&T, they have built-in firewalls in the routers that they give you. You can actually log into them and change them. All right. QoS, quality of service. We just talked about this. It allows you to prioritize traffic as it's coming through. All your kids are using Netflix and it's just killing your bandwidth, and you're not able to get onto this Zoom class and log in for the day and do your work. You can actually set the quality of service to downgrade streaming so that it'll put it on a lower quality of service, meaning it will give it less bandwidth to be able to operate so that you can function and do what you need to do. So you can take different types of traffic and prioritize them as to which should be best effort. Like, you know, when things are slow, yeah, we'll give it more bandwidth. But when things starting to tighten up, it prioritizes what hierarchy of the types of data get to transmit with the most bandwidth. All right, steps to installing your router. Locate the router in a central location where the wireless signal can spread out and promulgate throughout as much of the building as possible. Connect your AC power device, connect network cables if needed, start up your PC and connect the router directly to it, and use the manufacturer's instructions. Configure the settings and update any firmware as necessary. Who here has logged into their home router, not through the app on your phone, actually to the router, and changed the administrative password and name? Got 1, 2. Do you have a question, Luis?
Oh no, I'm asking the question that I changed the password and name.
Okay, good. So that's 2 out of 19 or 18. I would highly recommend you do this because I can tell you right now, they use the same administrative name and password on all of them. So that means anybody in your area, if they can get close enough to get a signal, has direct access to your Wi-Fi and can now access your router and everything inside your house. It is a massive security breach. So something to keep in mind, homework for everybody. Log into your personal router, change the administrative name and password.
Caveat, personal router. Now, if you get that gateway from your subscriber, it's a little more to it. But if you have a personal router in addition to that from your cable or whoever you deal with, then that's a little different. Because that was a little tougher. They out the gate, they kind of make it a little harder for people, but still, you want to change it. You want to make it yours.
Yeah, and the app that they give you to put on your phone, that's not the same thing.
Exactly.
So it'll also kind of give you a walkthrough on a lot of the various settings you have available, like your SSID broadcast. This essentially is your network name. It's what you see when you look on your device and you're saying like, I want to pick up a Wi-Fi network, or I want to log into the Wi-Fi network. It'll be a list of names. Those names it's giving you is basically considered the SSID. And it kind of announces the presence of the Wi-Fi to itself. It's, you know, and it will send that out to its maximum range. Now, there is an option to not broadcast an SSID. So where you could still log in because it knows you're there, but it doesn't tell the name of the network when it sends it out. They say this is a security feature, but anybody with a Wi-Fi analyzer is going to know there's a network there. And it's not going to take them long to figure out what it is. So bear that in mind. So SSID, name of the network. Channels, we talked about this a little bit earlier. You want to be able to set your channels up. Understand you have 1, 6, and 11 if you're operating off the 2.4 gigahertz, and you want to pick one of those. One nice feature recently is it will auto select. It will do kind of like a Wi-Fi scan to see what channels it's picking up in its range. And if it picks up something like on channels 1 and 11, it'll say, okay, I need to be on 6. So it will auto select. If you're having a lot of interference, you can force it to select a different channel if you wish. Now, here we go. MAC filtering. Marvin mentioned this a little bit earlier today. And every network device has its own unique MAC address, right? So it's possible to actually create a list on your router of authorized devices that are allowed to connect to it. This is considered a security feature. So when it is enabled, only the devices that are on that list will be granted access. But you actually can have it another way where you can deauthorize specific MAC addresses so they are not allowed. But more often than not, you're setting it to only allow specific MAC addresses. The reason why this is a weak security tool, if you can set up a virtual machine on your system, you can create a NIC with a spoofed MAC address, and you can put whatever MAC address you want in there. So if you find out, say if I find out what Avery's MAC address is for his NIC on his computer, I can duplicate that with a virtual machine and then act like I'm Avery. So it's actually quite simple to do. All right. Any questions with regards to MAC filtering and what it is? All right. WPS. Marvin's favorite thing.
It's so cool.
You want to explain this one, Marvin?
I'm for it. Okay.
Before
So
I get all doom and gloom on it.
yeah, I got you. I'm gonna hook everybody up. So that printer we talked about, right? I love it. It's working exceptionally well. So I get a new router, right? And I want to make that printer wireless on the network. So there's a button on the top of that printer that I can press that will shoot out a message to my router or to my computer that will allow it to automatically sync up with all the information it needs to get on my network. It's like a one-stop shop. Wouldn't you use that for everything in your house? Like, what is that not like making your life so easy, so simple, so perfect? Yes, everybody should be saying yes. If I can just go and just press a button and it recognizes my network and I can use it without going in there and typing in all that stuff, I'll use it. There's some issues with that. I didn't know about these until I got with Kelly, and he's gonna turn what appeared to be like the perfect day into something else.
So on your home routers, any devices you have, please go in and turn this feature off. Yes, it is convenient. It's nice. Seems like it's so wonderful. But this protocol is thoroughly cracked and easily hackable at this point. You don't even need to press the button anymore. There are there are like little programs out there that they literally can make it turn that on for you by utilizing the signals that it uses and go ahead and gain access to your networks and your devices. So please, please tell a friend, turn off WPS.
Why would they put it out there and then they set us up like that? So exploits happen and we can't confirm when they will happen. We'll talk about that in security. This thing called 0-day exploit. So once this was created, evidently all the bugs was not worked out. And then also people are getting craftier and craftier. So when they identify how to get around this pressing the button, that's a scary part. You don't even have to press the button anymore. Once they figure out how to get around that, you're susceptible to anybody getting on your network just by having that technology available. not turned off. Like, and that's the big scary part about this.
So after you go into your router and you change the username and password on your router, turn off WPS.
How do you do that? By the button, like in the router or something?
It's in the settings of the router.
It should be in the settings in your router to deselect or unchecked or unauthorized.
Do you want to enable WPS? Turn it off.
Yeah, that's it. Looking for that word. What you got, Rienzi?
Yeah, that was gonna be my question. Like, where do I do that?
In the settings of the router, again, not on the application on your phone. You actually have to go into the manual settings. If you have a Comcast router or Xfinity router, in a web browser, type in 10.0.0.1 and should take you right to your router. When you look into your, oh, here we go. Go into your command prompt, run an IP config, find out what your default gateway is. When you get the IP address for your default gateway, that's your router. Type that in to your web browser and it'll take you to your router. Based on who you have, whether it be Comcast, AT&T, or whatever, you can Google what are the default passwords for my router, and they'll tell you. It's probably going to be like admin, and then it'll be password is likely what it'll be, or PASSWD. That was another one. And then you'll go in and you can change all the settings on your router. You can look around in there and mess around with. I would, be careful what you mess around with, but you can look around, configure things. You can set up port forwarding, port triggering, adjust your security level. There we go. Okay. So as we discussed prior to lunch, if you have this wonderful, amazing technology called WPS on your router or any device in your household, turn it off. So you don't have that security breach or that wide open door to walk into your networks at your house or small offices or home, things like that. All right. We move on to another security feature called the DMZ or demilitarized zone. Anybody ever heard that term before? Not necessarily in IT. Where have we heard that one before?
The zone in I think Korea.
Yep, the zone in Korea, in between North and South. They create that little corridor. I guess it's about a mile wide or something like that, to create a buffer between for both sides, essentially. So you have this demilitarized zone. This is kind of a way in the computing world to create an area of slightly less security and separate it off from your internal networks so you can keep your internal networks protected. So essentially what you're doing is you're creating essentially two firewalls here. Let's do it like, there you go, horrible cloud that we will affectionately call the internet coming in, and we'll give flames on this. There we go, firewall. And we got a line through, and then we have another firewall here. Fire on it. There we go. And then you have your internal networks where you would have like your R&D, accounts payable, all that kind of fun stuff inside this double layer of protection. So you have an external firewall that has a little bit less security, and then you have an internal firewall with significantly more security. What can we do with this intervening space? We could do things like add web servers. So we can have our web servers to where outside people can come and look at all the wonderful products we have to offer. And they would have access to come in and look at this and have minimal things that they would be able to do. But even though they could get to our web server, they would not have access to our internal systems. So the web server would be separated out, sandwiched between two firewalls to allow external access to it. We might also do the same thing with our email servers. So employees could reach their emails from external sites and don't necessarily need to have full access to get behind the major wall to be able to access our accounting servers, research and development, HR, all the more sensitive information could be kept securely behind the internal firewall. So this essentially is what a DMZ is. Now, on your home router, the small little home router, the problem with the DMZ setup that they have, if you essentially put something in the DMZ, there's no secondary firewall. So basically you're putting it out open in the internet with nothing protecting it. So it will likely, whatever you put out there, get hacked to pieces. Yes, Chris.
If there's nothing protecting it, then what makes it a DMZ?
I don't know, honestly. They may have a very, very thin layer of protection there, but every way I've heard it explained, it basically puts it outside of the protection. This is on small home or office routers. They may have more expensive ones that actually create that dual layer, but this would be all done in a singular device. So you don't actually have the dual layer. In a enterprise network, you would have a firewall, the lines coming through, you know, the main server's connected, and then you would have another hardware firewall protecting you on the other end. Questions? If anybody's asking, yes, this is a cloud.
That's a good cloud,
What?
Kelly.
This is considered a cloud?
No, this is the internet. I just represented it as a cloud. This is a cloud, not the cloud. Always remember the cloud is just somebody else's computer. All right. Other features on your SOHO router that you can configure is you have your own Dhcp server, which what does that fantastical server do?
Automates IP.
There you go. Automatically assigns IP addresses within the ranges that we specify. And we can actually designate static ones within that range. Why would we want a static IP? Umberto, why would we want a static IP within our IP ranges?
For printers and routers that are DNS that are always in need for all other users have access.
Perfect. Things we don't want to move around that we have to locate on a regular basis. Printers, gateways, routers, DNS servers, all that kind of stuff. Those need to be static. We can't have those moving around. So within the range of IPs that we assign, there may be a group that is static, that once we assign it, they never change. Network address translation. Let's see here. Evan, what does NAT do? What is NAT? Network address translation. I purposely waited until right when you took a drink to ask you that question.
It sends a message through the network, or not like a message, but
it's in the name. Address translation.
IP address. It has to do with IP addresses.
It absolutely has to do with IP addresses.
So
what does it do?
It creates an IP address.
That's what the DHCP does.
Oh yeah.
You want to phone a friend?
Yeah.
Who you want to talk to?
Jordan.
Doesn't it translate the IP address and makes it private?
From what?
The router.
What's the opposite of private?
Oh, public.
So public to private, private to public. Network address translation.
I know a little bit.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, you did. It's going to be on your outward facing router because we don't want to buy 500 IPs because that is really, really expensive. We want to share maybe 2. So we will have internal private addresses that can operate on the network. And then when they hit the external router, the router will substitute it with the public facing IP and send it out over the internet. And when it comes back, it will switch it back to your IP and send it to your computer. Does anybody have any idea how it keeps track of that? How does it keep track of which computer these IPs go to?
I saw in Coursera, there's like a whole process, like the ARP.
Yeah, address
like,
resolution protocol.
yeah.
It uses a clever. Go ahead.
It has a list that it keeps in the.
Okay, but like when it's coming back from the outside, how does it know which person is supposed to get what? If me, Marvin, Avery, Mark, Alan, we're all Googling something, how does it know who to deliver the Google results to? Even though we're all Googling.
Each one has a different ephemeral port.
Perfect, Umberto. It has a clever use of ports. So when I send it out, I'm sending it out on port number 4752. Avery will send it out to be on 3285. And so when it sends it out on the public facing IP, it'll use the port number that we use. So when it comes back, it knows port number, 3782. Well, that's going to go to Avery. So that's how it keeps track of those internal, external IPs. It uses those port numbers, those ephemeral ports that you're sending your messages out on. Because when we communicate with a protocol, we need to use the port that they need. Like if I want to send email, I got to communicate with port 25, right? SMTP. But the originating port that it's coming from would typically be a ephemeral port, a real high level port. And it would be unique because remember we said there were 65,000 ports. Well, like 25,000 of them are just ephemeral. They can be used kind of for anything. And so it uses those ports to keep track as to what computers are communicating. So there we go.
That
Go ahead.
usually, oh, sorry.
So usually it uses the 3-way handshake or the 4-way handshake.
4-way handshake is for terminating a conversation. 3-way is for initiating a conversation. The ports are just in the address. So like if we're, sending something out, to port 80, we want to talk to a web address, then we have our data packet right here, and we're sending it from port number 33, 850. So, and it's going out. So when that web server responds and they send the packet back, they're going to send it to, there's the data, the data packet or whatever. When they send it back, they're going to be sending it to port 33,850 from port 80. And then when it hits the external router, the router is going to see, 33,850. That's Avery, because that was the one he sent it out on, and go ahead and direct that traffic to him. Do you have a question, Ramsey?
No, I was kind of trying to clarify. Is that why they write the port number on the at the end of the IPv address? You know how they write?
Well, you remember we talked about encapsulation. So each layer, there is additional data added. So like at the bottom layer, that's the physical layer. It's all ones and zeros. Above that, they would add MAC addresses on either side because that's layer 2, right? You'd have an origin and destination MAC address. If it's going out to the internet, the destination MAC address is likely going to be the gateway router. So it's going to send that information to the gateway router, and then the router is going to peel off those 2 layers, and you're going to be left with IPs, and then it's going to forward it onto the other computer through the internet. When they get it, they'll strip off the IPs. In there, it'll have the port numbers and say, okay, these are the protocols they want to talk to. So it wants to talk to a web server on port 80. So then it strips that off, gets the datagram out of it, through port 80 web server. And then when it's going to send it back, it goes, okay, this came from port 80. It's going to 33,850, puts that around it, sends it down to the next layer. The next layer goes, okay, you came from me. So here's my origin IP. I'm sending it back to the IP address that had the packet in there. So it puts that around it, sends it down to the MAC addresses. The MAC addresses, it goes, okay, here's the gateway router for my system. Here's my MAC address, sends it, hits the router again. Router peels off those MAC addresses, sends it through the internet on the IPs. And then that process keeps repeating back and forth as long as you're having that conversation for each little packet of data. So there is a lot of stuff going on in the conversation that the computers are having. So you have data constantly going up and down those layers of communication. And that's why it's important to understand which protocols are associated with which layers, because that helps you in your troubleshooting process. Do you have anything to add, Avery, since you're taking a drink? Just gonna keep an eye. Anytime somebody takes a drink, I'm gonna ask him a question.
I was about to say you were looking at me as I was going for that drink. No, I think that that covers it pretty well.
Maybe I should just do like voice to text and have that be my essay for. All right.
You could.
I know. I probably should just do that. It would go a lot faster. Gets me past the lazy factor.
Yep.
Yes, and it uses the sequence numbers of the packets to put all the packets back in order, so it makes sense when we're looking at it. So exactly, Luis. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff that goes on, not just the data that's being sent. So it's amazing how quickly and how much goes on in the computers kind of behind the scenes when we're not seeing it. All right. Quality of service. We talked about this a little bit earlier. So it allows us to be able to prioritize the types of data that are flowing through our systems. We can have best effort, top priorities, and give those data hierarchies so that it knows when resources get tight, who gets to go first, who has to go last. And then obviously universal plug and play. We want to be able to talk to everybody or as many people as possible as they're hooking up to the system. We're going to have the ability to communicate with all kinds of different devices. All right. Firewall, another feature within SOHO routers. They do have firewalls attached. They can do things like port filtering, which is wonderful. If you have ports that you are not using, like if you don't have a web server on your computer and you're not hosting any websites, you might want to close down port 80 because then it increases the security on your system. So high level or high access ports, if you're not using those things, you can shut them off. And that is called hardening your systems. It will not allow traffic coming through to communicate on those specific ports. So that is port filtering. Port forwarding is a whole nother thing. So say I have a webcam in my house for security. And I don't want to utilize one of those webcams with apps where I go to the app and look at what's going on in my cameras because that's just giving them a window into my house. So I buy my own webcam and I want to be able to monitor it myself without using third-party providers. Unfortunately, a lot of these webcams require you to log into port 80 to see what's going on with these webcams. So it uses a typical web port, hypertext transfer protocol port to log in and be able to manipulate and see what's going on in the camera. I don't want just anybody being able to ping my IP and look at my webcams. That'd be kind of creepy, low security, but I still want to be able to view it when I'm out in the world. So what I can do is I can set a weird port number, like port 862 or 8,462 to be a specific port on my gateway. And so when I type in my IP address, remember if you type in the IP address, then you put that colon, and then you put a number after it, that number after it is forcing it to check a certain port, right? So if we had, so if we had the, 192.168.15, it's a terrible 5.7. So if we have this IP address, this would be my home IP address to my gateway router. And then I could sit there and put a double colon in and put, 8,523 as a specific port. So I can tell it when I'm going to that IP, yes, I want to go to this IP, but I want to hit this port. What port forwarding does, I can block port 80 so people can't just go right into my web server. I can set up this port and do what's called port forwarding. Whenever I hit my external router and I have this port in, it will automatically forward traffic from there to port 80 on my webcam. And then I could see my security systems. So that way they can't come in on port 80 and instantly see my stuff. They would have to know the unique port number to be able to get in and see my security systems. So that's kind of what port forwarding is. Does it make sense? No. Okay. Think of it like a forwarding address. You move from, here in Jacksonville, Florida to Orlando. But you haven't told everybody that you've moved. You don't necessarily want to tell everybody you move, but you set up a forwarding address at the post office. So when they see an address, letter come to this address for you, they will instantly forward it to where it's actually supposed to go, which would be in Orlando. So you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's it. That's it.
That's what port forwarding is. Yes.
Oh.
So you can set up a designated port to go somewhere else. All right, VPNs, we did talk about that a couple times before. Creates an encrypted tunnel, allowing for a virtual connection to where the systems view you as if you were there on site or in another location of your choosing. And it creates a good level of encryption so that those who are not in those locations can't see what is being transmitted very easily. Yes, Humberto.
Yes, about VPN in Coursera, it says that it's the packet that are normally sent in TCP IP are repacket. So it may package of packages for VPN.
Yes.
That is the way.
Yeah, it's kind of encapsulated in this tunnel, offering a much more robust level of encryption of the data in transit. So it's very, very difficult, if not impossible, to actually view the data in transit. Yeah, Fidel, that is exactly what it is. Port forwarding, they'd use that a lot in setting up game servers. So you use specific ports to trigger to go to specific servers so that people can log onto those games. All right, questions about VPN? Big anime fans tend to like VPNs because they can use the regional locations to get access to various shows. All right.
Also, if you use Netflix.
Yeah, it's different in Canada. It's different in Europe. You get all kinds of different shows. So if you use a VPN with Netflix, you can see a bunch of different stuff. All right. Installation issues. One of the first things we should always check if we have issues, look at the documentation. Comes with a big thick book. They don't just send it for fun. It actually has good info in there. So always go to your documentation, look for it. That should be good. We talked about this a little bit earlier today. The SSID and password for the router should be changed so that it is not a wide open network vulnerable for people to just kind of step in. And this is your Wi-Fi sign in and password, not to be confused with your router sign in and password, which is going to be different. Please do not use the same thing for both. Get those changed so that your network is more secure. Also, use your command prompt to ping a known address. If you're not able to get out to the internet, the easiest one for people to remember tends to be Google's DNS server, which is 8.8.8.8. Ping that address. If you can get out there on the IP and it comes back, great. If you ping the actual web address, www.google.com, and it goes out and that does not come back, you probably have a problem with your DNS server. You might have put the DNS ID or IP address incorrect in your system when you were installing it. So you may need to just double check, make sure the correct DNS address is in there. Also, you could also use Google's DNS address if you so choose. That one never goes down. At least it has not to date gone down. Make sure the router itself is plugged in and the lights are on. And then you can also use your command prompt and go to ipconfig/all to verify your settings. Or if you're using a Mac, use ifconfig /all, and that'll give you all your network settings and you can verify that they are correct. See here. Check your TCP IP settings to make sure your IPs are correct. If you're having issues with an IP address, you can always switch it to dynamic if it's static, or static back to dynamic. If that is assigned, try switching it and see if that helps, either by manually inputting or maybe somebody put it in manually and it's incorrect and you switch it to dynamic and it'll assign you a good IP address. All right, connectivity issues. Make sure your device manager on your system recognizes the adapters without errors. If errors are occurring, it could be the drivers for your NIC. You may just need to go out and download and update those drivers so you have the most recent ones. If you have no errors, go to your network and sharing center. And if a red X is located between devices, indicates there is a problem. If you click on the X, Windows Network Diagnostics and Troubleshooting Program will start up and run, and hopefully it will give you an answer. If you have an APIPA and a link local address is assigned, something is wrong with your DHCP. It's not able to talk to it. You could have address conflicts. If you have address conflicts where two people have the same IP, you'll have intermittent internet connectivity. Questions? I know that was a lot of information very quickly.
That's where we'll get into releasing and renewing our IP
Yes.
addresses.
Yes. So if two people have the same one, you can release your IP back to the DHCP and request the new one.
Yep. Just make sure you do it in the right order.
Yeah. Don't renew then release. Then you won't be able to talk. But we'll get into that. And I absolutely believe there is a test out lab for that. For those of you who are sitting there wondering, please, oh please, can we try this out? All right. Next. Wireless issues. Common wireless user errors include your Wi-Fi adapter may be turned off on your computer. On laptops, this may even be just a toggle switch. Sorry, 1 second. Forgot to tell somebody not to pick up one of my kids. Apologies. All right. So yeah, on a laptop, it is a toggle switch that can be turned on and off. Sometimes you can bump it, not realize it. Sometimes they may go on a business trip and on the plane turn it off because they ask you to. And then you get back and you forgot that you turned it off, and all of a sudden now you have no Wi-Fi. Router placed in an area where there is radio frequency interference with other other routers using the same channels. You can change channels, probably try to help with that. If you have heavy use of wireless phones, not cell phones, wireless phones, because they operate off the 2.4 gigahertz bandwidth, and microwaves that may interfere with your Wi-Fi signal. If the microwave is in between you and the router, every time somebody turns on the microwave, you're going to get static. It's going to affect your signal. Other big thing is just entering the wrong key for access. It happens sometimes, it's like 15 digits or 10 digits or something like that, and you just flip 2 of them and you think you're putting it in right, and unfortunately no. So you need to verify the key you're putting in is correct. SSID is not broadcasting. You need to turn that on if that is something you want, or leave it off if that is something you prefer as well. If the signal is weak and intermittent, your device is probably too far from the Wi-Fi router itself. Questions so far? All right. Here is a good slide to take a snapshot of. It gives you very quick, basic information as to what you need to know with each of the wireless standards for the A, B, G, N, and AC. So I would highly recommend taking a snapshot of this if you can.
I can post it in the chat.
Thank you very much. And so Avery's going to take care of that for us. All righty, we have come to the end of this particular leg of our journey. We should now be able, yes, Alan.
Could you go back? I just got to take a quick screenshot of that. Thank you.
Did you get it?
Can I get number 39 as well?
Slide number 39. That one. Good deal. All right. So after that, we should now be able to compare and contrast internet connection types and features. Compare and contrast Wi-Fi networking standards and encryption types, your WEPs, your WPA and WPA2. Understand which one has TCP, which one has AES. We should be able to explain the role of the router and describe the differences between a wired and wireless router. One has wires, one doesn't. We should be able to describe how to install and configure one. Hint, read the paperwork. We should be able to identify common pitfalls when installing a SOHO router, identify common problems, and describe how we can solve some of those problems. We'll get a little more into detail with that when we start talking about command line interface and the commands we should be aware of.